My Uncle Silas was a man who could eat anything. He could eat stewed nails. He had lived on them once for nearly a week. He told me so. I was a boy then. At that time we used to drive over to see him in the summer, about one Sunday a month, arriving in time for dinner, tethering the white horse about noon in the shade of the big pearmain overhanging the lane outside. It was always what we were going to eat and what we were going to wet with. At dinner, once, we had pheasant, which was something very special, and I asked him if he'd shot it. "No," he said, "it just fell down the chimney." Another time we had goose, and I asked him if that fell down the chimney. "No," he said, "it was sitting on 18 eggs in the winter oats, and I cut its 2 legs off with a scythe. Cut 'em off and never broke egg. Ain't that right, George?" "Yes, that's right," my grandfather said. "Well, it ain't, then," Silas said, cocking his bloodshot eye at him. "Don't you go telling the kids such blamed lies. Cut the goose legs off with a scythe. Don't you believe it, boy. It's just a tale. He's just stuffing you. The goose went to sleep in a well bucket, and I went to draw some water one night and let it down unbeknownst, and it got drowned." "Couldn't it swim?" I said. "Oh, it was asleep. Never woke. It was just a belly flopper, and it was done for." Another time we had venison. I knew what that was. "A deer," I said. "Did that fall down the well?" "No," he said. "I shot it with a bow and arrow." "With what?" I said. "How?" "Bow and arrow. One of these days I'll show you." And he did. I badgered and bothered him until one summer Sunday afternoon he made an ash bow standing as high as himself and cut arrows out of flower canes. "Oh, you don't believe me, do you?" he said. "Well, I'll show you." He tipped the arrows with old shoe awls and bits of filed wire and anything handy. "'Course there ain't no venisons about, but I'll show you." Then he went into the field beyond the house, and Silas stalked an old cow. Finally, he stood about 10 yards away from her and shot her in the backside. The cow leapt up about 10 feet in the air and tore about the field as though she were heat crazy. "That's how I done the venison," Silas said. "Only it was a bigger bow and a bigger arrow, and I hit it a bit harder." Now you know when Silas tells you anything, it's right, don't you? "Yes," I said. "You know Silas don't tell lies, don't you?" he said. "You know Silas don't stuff you with any old tale." "Yes," I said. "I know now." It must have been some time after this that he told me the story of the nails, the stewed nails, because it was some time when I had extra faith in him. I forget how it came up. Perhaps it was the duck eggs. It may have been the sow. I know he said, "You kids, blimey, hair and teeth, you don't know what it is to go without grub. Look at me. I can eat anything. That too. Look at that time I lived on stewed nails for a week." That's one for you, ain't it? That makes your eyes pop, don't it? Stewed nails for a week. I'm glad to. Didn't they, weren't you bad?" I said. "Oh, they were just old nails. I had pepper and salt on them, too." I asked him how it happened, and when. I remember having no fear at all that he would tell me. We were alone, sprawling under the elders beyond the bean rows, in the shade. He could tell me anything if we were alone. It was only in the presence of others that sometimes he was not so sure. "Oh, about 50 years ago. I was only a kid, about 30. He stopped, eyed me seriously, squinted. "You ain't gonna tell nobody about this if I tell you?" "No, oh no." "That's right. There's a policeman at the bottom of this, and I don't want to get into trouble. You cork it." "I will." "Sure? You promise?" "Finger wet, finger dry," I said. That's right, and cut my throat if I tell a lie. This, what I'm telling you, is true. He took a quick look round, spoke lower, dropped an eyelid at me, and said, I'd gone up to Sam Tilly's to take the old soul to the boar. Sam was a policeman. His wife was a young gal about 20. She was fiery and all. Nice gal, I knew her. Sometimes Sam was on nights, and sometimes he was on days. That time he was on days. Well, it was a hot day, and after the boar had finished, she said, If you're tired, come in and sit down a bit. So I went in, and she said she was tired too. So I made no more to do. Don't wear a chair out, I said. Sit on my knee. So she did. She was light as a chicken, lovely. He paused, recollecting, licking his loose red lips, going off into a momentary trance. Oh, and then, what happened? Where was I? She was tired. She was resting on your knee, I said. Oh, that's it. And then, I know, we started playing with her duck eggs. What duck eggs? Oh, she kept ducks. Didn't I say that? She had some lovely ducks, and she used to let me have her eggs sometimes. I forgot how it was, but we started fooling about with her duck eggs. She kept hiding them, and I had to find them. You know, just fooling about. I know, I said. Like hide the thimble? That's it. Like hide the thimble. Like that. Only these were duck eggs. Where'd she hide them? I said. All over the show. Upstairs, downstairs, everywhere. In the oven, in bed. Oh, she was a tartar. She was hot. With running about so much? Aye, that's it. Running about so much. And then... He looked at me hard without a twinkle. You gonna cork this in? Keep it a secret, all right? I promised faithfully to cork it in, and he went on. Well, then he turned up. Sam. All of a sudden she looks out the window, and there he is coming up the garden path. By God, that gave me a turn. He made motions of a man in a variety of agonies, sweat, thirst, fright, more thirst. I could see he must have been a good deal upset. What did you do? I said. Oh, I never done anything. I couldn't. I was scared stiff. It was her who done it. Here, quick, she says, in the cellar. And there I was. And there I stopped. How long for? I said. For a week. A week? Why didn't she let you out? She forgot. Forgot all about me. Didn't I tell you how forgetful she was? Oh, she was shocking. Sometimes I'd go up for a dozen duck eggs, and she'd bring the boar out, and then I'd go for apples, and she'd bring me duck eggs. You see? Yes, I said, I see. But why did she lock you in at all? You were all right. You weren't doing anything. Here, he said, you go up to the house, and in the corner cupboard you'll see a bottle marked liniment. You bring it. I want to rub my back. It's giving me what every time I stir. So I went to fetch the bottle, and after that, for some reason, perhaps because he kept drinking the liniment instead of rubbing his back with it, the tale warmed up. He began to tell me how he lay in the cellar night and day, in complete darkness, not daring to shout out and wondering what would happen to him. But what I wanted to know most was how he lived, what he had had to eat. Eat? He said. Eat? I never had a mussel. Not a mussel. All I'd got was a mite of pepper and salt screwed up in a mite of paper in my waistcoat pocket. You must have gone down to skin and bone, I said. Skin and bone? You're right, he said. That's about all I was, and shouldn't have been, that if it hadn't been for the nails. He went on to tell me, then, how after the third or fourth day, after he had searched every inch of the cellar, floor and ceiling, on his hands and knees, he got so desperate that he began to prize out the nails of the floorboards, and how after that there was nothing for it but to eat them, and how he made a fire of his pocket linings and splinters of floorboard and anything handy, and lit it with the only match he had, and how he collected water off the damp walls in a tobacco tin, and how at last he put the nails in and stewed them. "Stewed 'em," he said, "all one night and all one day, and then ate 'em. I had to. It was either that or snuff it." "By golly," I said, "what did he taste like?" "Course, it's been a long time ago," he said. "They tasted like, I don't know. I had plenty of pepper and salt on 'em. That took the taste out a bit." I sat silent, thinking it over. "Course it's the iron what done it," he said. "Iron's good for you, ain't it? It was only the iron what done it." I still sat silent. It was a fine story, but somehow it seemed, as I sat there in the hot shade of the elders, with their thick sourish smell rank in the sun, almost too good. I couldn't swallow it. I believed all about the duck eggs and the woman and the cellar and everything, all except the nails. Stewed nails. I kept turning it over in my mind and wondering. And he must have seen my unbelief, because suddenly he said, "You don't believe me now," he said, "do you? You think I'm stuffing you?" He looked at me long and hard, with a gaze from which the habitual devilry had been driven out by a marvellous innocence. "Look at that, then." He seemed suddenly to have an inspiration. He opened his mouth, baring his teeth. They were old and broken and stained by the yellow and brown of decay. "See 'em?" he said. "That's rust, nail rust. It got into my teeth." He spoke with impressive reverence. "It got into my teeth eating them nails, and I've never been able to get it out again." He gave a sigh, as though burdened with the telling of too much truth. "That's where women land you," he said.